Notice how the media just magically invented a new spelling for Kiev. Suddenly, as with new pronouns and words like Latinx, Kiev was born. You see it all over the media, and even conservatives have hopped on board, using the manipulative new spelling. See conservative historian Victor David Hansen use it here. Could this be because in promoting the war now, the legacy media doesn't want you looking up Kiev under its real spelling, in case you stumble across Ukrainian energy company Burisma and all the bribes flowing to US politicians? Pay attention to the Orwellian system at work. I say this now as Daniel Natal under my new spelling, lest you look me up and discover unsavory things in my past. Look, don't judge me. I was young. I had college debt. I needed the money. As we reported in our earlier video entitled Russian to War, what's really unfolding now is not a war between Russia and the Ukraine, but a global attack on the US dollar. After World War II, the United States was in an enviable position. The rest of the great empires in Europe lay in rubble, and America, nestled between two protective oceans, was intact. As a result of our stability and perceived reliability, the English pound lost its role as the world reserve currency, and this passed on to the United States. This happened at the Bretton Woods Conference in 1944. A good book on it is Ed Conway's The Summit, Bretton Woods 1944. The international accord was hashed out at a hotel in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, which is where the system gets its name. At any rate, after the war, the entire world agreed to allow the United States to take over Great Britain's role of global superpower, policing the oceans with its deep-sea navy to protect trade, as well as using its money, the dollar, as the world's reserve currency. This gave America tremendous power around the world. One aspect of this power was expressed in the early 1970s, when we decoupled the dollar from gold and switched it over to oil. Nixon basically went to OPEC and made them a deal. The United States would protect their unpopular, ruthless regimes, and in exchange for this, they would denominate oil only in dollars. This means that any country that wants to buy oil has to have US dollars. The oil cartels will not accept euros or lira or yen. To keep your trucks on the road, you need US dollars. To have petroleum for your electricity power plant, you need US dollars. Thus, all the countries on Earth have to come up with a way to get those dollars to keep their societies functioning. They could swap out their own currency to get US dollars, but they'd get killed on the exchange rate. So what they usually do is acquire dollars by other means. You can hear one trader explain it here.
It takes energy and oil to grow an economy. So Japan, for example, has very few natural resources, including oil. Okay, so they must import large amounts of oil. This means that they must have lots and lots of US dollars. So Japan manufactures a Honda, ships it here to the US, receives payment in US dollars, okay, for that product, and then it could use those US dollars to purchase oil. Now, the petrodollar system has proven to be very beneficial to the US economy since the 1970s. Many of the oil-producing nations agreed not only to sell their oil in exchange for US dollars instead of their own currency, okay, but they also agreed to take those excess profits and then invest them back into the safety of US government bonds. Okay, so in essence, the US receives a double loan out of every single barrel of oil that's sold worldwide. I mean, that's just incredible, you guys. So every global oil transaction, every barrel of oil that is sold on the world markets increases the demand for US dollars. And it also increases the demand for US debt securities or bonds.
He makes a good point. Not only do countries acquire US dollars by selling us valuable goods for worthless pieces of paper, but they also buy our treasuries to get their hands on more dollars. And our treasury bonds are basically our debt. This is why we slid into the habit of printing up debt to fund our social programs, because we know that there will always be customers for it. We can print up as much debt as we want, and there will be people willing to buy it to get their hands on those US dollars for oil. If they ever stop buying our bonds, our debt, we're doomed. We will have to start paying for stuff with our own wealth, and we just don't have the money without the world funding us. We also would have to be able to finance those military bases around the world, which are basically funded by the petrodollar system. US power would collapse overnight if people stopped using petrodollars to buy oil. This is why we invaded Iraq. Saddam Hussein threatened to sell oil in euros and other currencies. It's also why we deposed Gaddafi in Libya. He was trying to create a gold-backed African dinar and was going to use that for trade. If the world goes off the petrodollar system, America is in serious peril. And here's the thing. China and Russia have been de-dollarizing. Dumping their U.S. treasuries, they've been acquiring gold for their reserves, as well as other activities that we would perceive as economic warfare, such as creating the BRICS system. That stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. These are countries who are creating a parallel financial system to bypass the dollar. Initially, there were just 5 countries involved. Now 148 nations have joined up. China has also created a parallel international settlement system called CIPS to oust the American SWIFT system in international banking transactions. CIPS stands for Cross-Border Interbank Payment System. While most of America has been distracted with nonsense, an emerging challenge has been coalescing against the US dollar. And this is problematic, as Tucker Carlson explains here.
And finally, a topic no one ever brings up: we must protect the US dollar. America's power derives from its wealth. Rich countries get to do what they want. Poor countries must obey their masters or they get invaded. We just saw that happen. That is the unchanging rule. In this country, control of the US dollar is the key to our wealth. Our entire financialized, debt-based economy rests on the unique privilege of issuing the world's reserve currency. If the US dollar is ever replaced, we are in legitimate trouble. Our debt will come due, our government will go bankrupt, and millions of Americans will become poor immediately. So this is the main thing we ought to be worried about, and it is a greater risk now than ever before. Sanctions are an emotionally satisfying way to punish someone like Vladimir Putin, who clearly does deserve to be punished. No one's really against sanctions. But the question is, do they work? Clearly, multiple sanctions did not prevent last night's invasion of Ukraine. Let's start there. At the same time, sanctions give Russia and many other countries across the world a strong incentive to dump the US dollar, which is the means by which we enforce sanctions. So last summer, for example, in a story that most people didn't pay enough attention to, Russia, in response to sanctions, completely removed the US dollar, its assets, from its sovereign wealth fund, its national wealth fund. The Chinese noticed. They understand exactly how this works. And in their effort to displace the United States, they are strongly in favor of it. China is trying to become the first major country in the world whose central bank issues sovereign digital currency. If that works, and many efforts like it, it would be a huge loss for the United States, an irreplaceable loss that would change this country forever, much more than an invasion of Ukraine. So we should be watching that, attacks on the primacy of the US dollar globally, every bit as intently as we watch the coverage currently on television of the hot war. If at the end of this conflict, whenever that is, countries around the world have come to see the Chinese yuan as a stronger, more stable currency than the US dollar, then this country will have lost more than we understand. Somebody needs to be paying attention to this. Let's fervently hope that somebody is.
Danielle DiMartino Booth, formerly of the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas, made an interesting comment years before the current events in Eastern Europe. Regarding the dethroning of the dollar as the world's reserve currency, she said that the only thing that could do it would be a hot war. Listen here.
When you talk about the rating agencies, how much of the U.S. sovereign credit rating do you think is based on reality, and how much of it is based on this confidence, global confidence? I mean, how in the pocket of the U.S. are the rating agencies? What's the realistic likelihood that they do what they did to Canada?
Well, you know what? That's irrelevant.
Well, it's relevant to me.
Well, it is and it isn't. I mean, it could be scary, but we forget that the debt of the United States was downgraded a few summers ago. And, you know, the rest of the world kind of yawned. They're like, well,
right.
Is it going to be the yen? No. Is it going to be the euro? No. Is it going to be the yuan? Hell no. So they're like, well, I guess we're stuck with it. So, you know, until we push the envelope so far that all the conspiracy theorists running around on my Twitter feed, by the way, there is this little button called unfollow. Unfollow. You can do that. But all my conspiracy theorists who think we're going to lose reserve currency status tomorrow, it doesn't work like that. It doesn't. Do your history. Look back at reserve currency status declines. They're associated with this thing called a hot war.
So what we have here is a delicate situation in which the United States may be being baited into a hot war with Russia, and China may have more of a hand in what's going on than what most people realize. It was Russia and China in collaboration who made the BRICS financial system to undermine America's financial system. It was Russia and China who promoted SIPS to oust the SWIFT settlement system for international banking transactions. In his book, Destined for War, Graham Allison, a China expert at Harvard, studied history and noticed that when there was a rising power and a declining power, in 12 out of 16 cases, they went to war. He calls this Thucydides' trap. The United States may be lumbering into a bear trap in Ukraine, and events may not be what they seem. Graham Allison points out that China is on track to overtake the United States in GDP by 2024. Demographers have pointed out that China won't have the military-age male population due to their one-child policy to challenge the United States in 5 years. They're aging out. If China's going to make a move, it has to do so within a 5-year window. We're living through that window now. As events unfold, look less to Russia than to China, which is upholding Russia as a decoy. As we're paying attention to Eastern Europe, pay more attention to the financial changes which constitute economic warfare against America. If America starts that hot war, it may not end in the way that Washington wants it to. In case you haven't caught it before, check out the reporting of the New America's own Veronica Kirilenko. She does amazing interviews with original analysis. Check her out on thenewamerican.com or any of the other platforms carrying these videos. Remember the name, Veronica Kirilenko.